Citizens of Ember shall be assigned work at 12 years of age. Lena Mayfleet desperately wants to be a messenger. Instead, she draws the dreaded job of pipeworks laborer, which means she'll be working in damp tunnels deep underground. Dune Harrow draws messenger and asks Lena to trade. Dune wants to be underground. That's where the generator is, and Dune has ideas about how to fix it. For as long as anyone can remember, the great lights of Ember have kept the endless darkness at bay. But now, the lights are beginning to flicker. The City of Ember. Jeanne DuPrau.
All right. I am Jessica.
I'm Kayla.
And this is the YA Sisterhood, a book where we talk about young adult fiction.
Podcast where we talk about young adult
I'm so tired.
So there isn't... Jeanne DuPrau, I didn't really find a whole lot of information on her. She was an English major in college, taught English, and has kind of always been a bit of a writer, or at least been in love with stories and writing.
Yeah.
She lives in California, and then I felt it necessary to bring up that her dog is named Ethan.
I'm not okay with that.
Kind of disturbing. And my immediate reaction was,
This is my dog, John.
Yeah, like, my immediate thought was, who names their dog after a human? And then I had to step back, because my dog is named after a human. But my dog is named Wesley, everybody. But I named him after Wesley from The Princess Bride. And, like, it's not really a human name, even though it is, because Wesley is a fictional character.
Do you think her dog is named after Ethan Frome?
God, I hope not. She and I would have to throw hands at that point. Ethan Frome is like my kryptonite.
We're not fans. Sorry, Edith Wharton. Not fan.
I could go on so long of a rant about that. Let's move on.
Anyway, I actually have facts about this, but I know. I have apparently in an interview, she mentioned the inspiration for this book was her time growing up during the Cold War and fearing the nuclear bomb. So
interesting.
Yes, which I think reads in this book pretty obviously.
Yeah,
it feels very Cold War-y. Mm-hmm. Big Fallout vibes.
Yes, I got that for sure. Fun fact about me, I actually stole this book from my middle school library. I didn't realize it till I opened it to read it.
Oh,
and
God,
saw the stamp.
What have you done?
I was like, I don't remember stealing this, which is not a good thing to think. But apparently I did. Or maybe they gave it to me, I don't know, but I have it now.
So what's this book about?
The plot of this book is pretty straightforward. These people live in a city, and the city is dark all the time. It's lit by lamps, but it's pretty much dark all the time. But the lights are starting to go out, and they're starting to run out of supplies, and there's nothing outside of their city, supposedly. It's all darkness.
Yeah, people wander off into the darkness and go mad.
And they go mad, and they die, and, like, all kinds of craziness. When you're 12 years old, you get assigned to a job. And Lena is essentially our main character. Dune's kind of a main character, but Lena is really where it's at. Yeah. So Lena gets assigned to a job she hates as a pipes laborer. It's like lottery style. And Dune gets the job of messenger, which is the job that Lena wanted. So they trade. And Lena finds something in her house that the previous mayor kept. So you know at the beginning of the book that this was all sort of fabricated and created, and that there's a box to tell them how to get out, and it's going to open after a certain amount of time, and it's supposed to pass down through the mayors. But one of the mayors was dying, thought there were secrets in it, tried to open it, and died before he could put it back or explain it to anybody, so it just went missing. And she finds the instructions after her little sister, like, tries to eat them. And then the whole book is really just them piecing together the instructions, realizing how bad things are, and then escaping the city, realizing that they were in a cave all along, and now they're in the real world, and that's the book. I don't really think, other stuff happens, but
that's mostly the plot.
The bare essentials.
Yeah.
The Reader's Digest version.
Yeah, it's one big old allegory of the cave.
It sure is, and we will talk about that later.
Obviously, since they live in a big old cave, and it's a big old allegory of the cave, the most prominent theme we run into in this book is light versus darkness.
Yeah.
What is light? What is the nature of light? What is the nature of darkness? Mm-hmm. And it's discussed. She says the quiet part loud through the character of Clary a couple of times.
She does. And Clary, oh my gosh. We're
Clary, thank you. Clary is Gandalf, the greenhouse Gandalf. Here to give us plot.
Yeah, there's also a lot of stress put on community versus selfishness, I think. Mm-hmm. The idea of doing what's good for everyone versus what's good for yourself. And like,
it's very critical of hedonism in that way.
Yeah, for sure. And sort of that like nihilistic, like, I'm going to just do what's right for me because it doesn't matter. It's very critical of that as well. Yeah. And then, of course, life and the nature of life. And that sort of ties in with that, like, light versus darkness, but definitely life finding a way. Mm-hmm. Life finds a way.
It does. And there, you know, obviously with the grandma character dying, there's also an element of death and darkness.
Mm-hmm. Our main character, Lena, she kind of at the beginning comes across as a bit airheaded, but she's actually really clever.
Yeah, I liked her a lot, actually.
She likes to run, she likes to explore, she's very curious, and she wants to solve the puzzle. I liked her. I thought she was cool. I don't know that she has like she's very like laugh it off and laid back. Yeah. Which is kind of fun for a main character. Because you don't get a lot of those, and I like those kinds of characters.
Especially a girl version of that character. Yeah. Because usually, if you get a girl main character, she is so high-strung.
Or she's so laid back, she doesn't care about anything. And it's fun to see someone who's kind of in between that's
just
like...
a person, maybe?
Yeah, like, she falls down, and everyone starts laughing, and she laughs, too, and just, like, makes a big joke out of it. And I appreciate that, because, like...
I feel that.
That's me. Like, when I fall down, I laugh at myself and encourage others to do the same because I feel silly. Dune is the opposite.
Caitlin doesn't like Dune.
I didn't say I don't like Dune. I don't dislike... Well, first of all, Dune's name is stupid.
Dune's name is so stupid.
Dune's name is the stupidest name.
I challenge you, listener. Go stand in front of your bathroom mirror and just say to your reflection, "Hello, Dune." And see how ridiculous you feel.
I mean, I think they'll feel ridiculous for a couple reasons there, but...
No, it's just because of the name.
But his name, like...
It's bad.
It's so bad. It just sounds so dopey. Like, it makes him sound...
It sounds like a George Carlin joke.
Like, it sounds like he's a goon.
Yeah.
Like, I think Dune goon. And then I have to, like, step back and be like, no, he's smart or whatever. But, like, Dune is full of rage.
He's a very angry young man. I do think he's interesting... He has interesting hobbies. I
think he's intense.
He's a very intense kid.
I don't think he's completely full of rage. I think he has some anger issues. Mm-hmm. But I think mostly he's just really intense. Yeah. And I wondered briefly while reading it if he was on the spectrum, maybe. He has some tendencies.
He seems a little bit like maybe he could be non-neurotypical, I think.
Yeah.
Like, maybe not very far onto the spectrum.
Oh, yeah, no, I don't think that he was like...
He definitely is... He's really focused, really serious, even when other people aren't serious. Mm-hmm. He kind of misses some social cues sometimes. And he's very intense, like you mentioned.
He likes to take things apart and put them back together with a very, very, like, fervent intensity, which could just be, like, things he's into.
Yeah, he's interested in bugs. Mm-hmm. He draws their life cycles and stuff, which is a very Leonardo da Vinci sort of thing.
Yeah, it's cool.
I think, there are people who've made the case that da Vinci was on the spectrum.
Yeah, so I just thought it was mentionable.
Yeah.
All of that said, I don't think that Dune is really necessary to the plot. I legitimately put person as a lamp ? Dune, because Lena at the beginning gets the pipes worker job and wants the messenger job, and they switch. And then she finds the instructions and she's piecing it all together, and she realizes that it's down in the pipe. So she asks Dune to help her because he's a pipe worker like she would have been. And that's how he gets caught up in everything. But he doesn't really figure anything out.
No.
Until they're going down into the tunnel and he recommends tying a match to a candle. Mm-hmm. But otherwise... He doesn't.
Also, really... that whole scene was ridiculous.
Yeah, it was. I also thought it was weird that there weren't candles in this. Like, they didn't leave them with anyway. So he doesn't really do anything. He doesn't really figure anything out. Like, he's a fun character, and I think his and Lena's dynamic is really interesting. I like that he's sort of introverted and she's more extroverted. Mm-hmm. But overall, I didn't really feel like... I liked the fact that Lena could have done it all if she'd been a pipes worker all on her own.
Yeah, pretty much.
She would have been fine.
But I kind of wonder about that because I think we're supposed to compare her to her best friend Lizzie a little bit as a character who got a job she hated and became corrupt, which I'm not sure how much of that we should read into, but that's what the text says.
Well, I don't know that it was because of the job she hated. I think it was because of the boy she liked.
I don't know that that's better.
Yeah, it's really not. Yeah, Lizzie is a really interesting character.
She's basically an extreme version of Lena in some ways. Like
yeah. I thought that when they were having their conversation about her kind of going corrupt, about her stealing stuff in the storeroom.
It's just a very extreme reflection of what Lena is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, at every point. And so in that way, she's also kind of a lamp character. Mm-hmm. Like, she doesn't have any bearing on the plot beyond causing Lena to muse about her own morality.
Mm-hmm. Be a little bit more introspective. But Lizzie is really interested in Looper,
who is my doing the most character for this book. Looper is super extra, in my opinion.
Yeah. He
walks funny. Apparently he looks kind of funny. I'm not sure how he's supposed to look based on the book description, really. I will talk about this one later on in this discussion, but I kind of had my Tolkien blinders on a lot during this book.
Yeah.
So there might have been descriptions I missed, but he's described as a little bit odd looking. Mm-hmm. So it's supposed to be odd that Lizzie likes him so much.
Well, I don't think it's that he's necessarily odd looking. I think that Lena thinks that he's odd looking. Mm-hmm. But I don't think it's necessary. Well, I don't know. It's hard to say if he's actually odd looking or not. But Lizzie's a little bit offended when Lena says that. She's like, I don't think so at all. I think he's very handsome.
Which, life's like that sometimes.
Sometimes it be that way.
Yeah. But Looper is basically the town fixer. He sneaks into the storerooms, gets his hands on a bunch of stuff that people forgot about or maybe socked away in decades past, and fences them to the mayor and guards in the town. Yeah. So he fences all the stuff, and
he's not. I think he was kind of demonized a little bit.
I think so.
I don't think that what he was doing was necessarily right since they were running out of resources, but also that stuff was
just gonna go.
I hate to say that,
but then again, I'm an avowed hedonist, so I can't abide her argument against hedonism necessarily. I think there's something.
I kind of agreed with Lena too, though, that other people could use that stuff.
Yeah.
So it was definitely
there was not an easy answer necessarily.
The book tried to handle it like there was and there wasn't.
Yeah, but even though the argument was well made for both sides, the author eventually, or at least Lena eventually, comes down on the side of what's better. Wrong. Yeah, it's wrong to use resources that are going to be gone for personal enjoyment. But they kind of hand wave it, not necessarily with Looper and Lizzie, but using the mayor and the guards characters.
See, that's my thing.
Just sidestep the whole question entirely.
Well, my thing with that is with Looper and Lizzie, I didn't really think they were doing anything too wrong because they weren't taking that much. But the mayor was different.
He was hoarding resources in a bunker, basically, because he knew everyone was going to revolt and he was going to sit in his bunker and, I guess, eat himself to death.
I think the intention was just to be comfortable until he died.
Yeah, I don't understand. Well, I mean, I guess I do, but I don't know.
I thought it was kind of weird.
Yeah.
I agreed when Lena was like, what's he going to do? Just sit in there while we all die? And I was kind of like, yeah, at what point is he going to go down there and be down there? What if, it was very, short-sighted, but he was doing long-term thinking about it. So I was just kind of like, what?
Mm-hmm. The mayor in general is kind of weird. He's kind of, I wrote down, cartoonishly evil in spite of some of the dialogue that Lena get. Clary talking about the mayor says, he was once, he was always a foolish man, but he was never this evil.
He let his power corrupt him.
And it's like, okay, Gandalf, I get it.
Clary.
I get it. I'm paying attention to
he was just very evil. He didn't really have a lot of depth.
No, he was very much Aesop's moral beat you over the head with the...
Whereas Clary was constantly waxing poetic about some existential, she was just, every time she talked, I was like, is she high?
She is the greenhouse person, though, to be fair. So Clary was Lena's dad's best friend when Lena's dad was alive. And, was really a good friend to her when her parents died, and still is, to an extent, a good friend to her. She's also somehow the wisest person in Ember. But she's like the
she's very wise.
She's very wise because she works in because she works in a greenhouse, I guess.
Yeah, I think she's really supposed to be seen as like very introspective and like has essentially I think she's sort of like the mixture. If Dune and Lena had grown up and mixed into one person, I think she's supposed to be sort of the end goal for what they could have become. Type. Maybe not. I don't know.
I don't know that I see that necessarily. I definitely see her as I definitely see her as an author insert that's there to kind of beat you over the head with
definitely
the story.
That.
I feel Clary just felt like not a bad author insert. I mean, everybody has an author insert, it seems like. Even Lois Lowry had a character that I argued was an author insert.
Yeah.
And that's classic. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. It just Clary makes the subtext text a lot.
Yes, a lot.
And in ways that I think are beneath the author because she had already made those points effectively by the time.
Every time Clary started to wax poetic, I was listening to the audiobook. I wanted to fast forward and I was like, I don't know how far to fast forward to where she stops talking. So I just had to listen to it at 2 speed. It was just, I just kept forcing myself not to zone out.
And Clary's great, I'm sure.
I didn't dislike her. I wish she would shut up.
She was
a little bit. A little bit. Not a lot. Some of her stuff was interesting, I guess, but mostly I was like, okay, we get it. Life finds a way.
Right. As kind of a counterpoint to Clary, we have Mrs. Murdo, aka New Mom.
I liked her
a lot. I like that she just sort of slipped in and took over in the way that people do.
Yeah.
It felt very realistic to me where she just sort of sidled in. She's like, y'all need my help. I'm retired.
I'm doing it. Yeah. She was very like that elder lady that always knows what's going on. She's very put together.
Yeah.
She just seemed very put together. She saw that Lena...
You could also call her Miss Marple.
Yeah. She saw that Lena was struggling, I think. Which is why she started hanging around. I think she noticed that Lena's grandmother was sliding downhill and was like, these people need help. I think she knew Lena's 12. She may be, quote unquote, an adult with a job, but she's still just 12. And I think she realized that and was just like, I'm just going to step in here. Mm-hmm. And then when Lena's grandmother dies, she's just like, okay, y'all are going to live with me now.
Yep.
I've made all the decisions. And Lena even has a moment where she's like, I'm alone. And then she's like, but I can relax because I don't have to worry about everything anymore. And I don't know. I liked that. Some people may have found her meddly, but mostly I found her...
I liked her a lot.
Compassionate, but in a straightforward, stick-to-itiveness way.
It felt like a real person in a real community to me. And the fact that she was a very stern person, but that didn't stop all of them from recognizing that she had that kind of warmth was really great, I thought. And the fact that she was she came over the first time because Lena asked her to, because Lena's grandmother had a dementia episode and it freaked Lena out, but she had to go to work. Mm-hmm. And then she just started showing up after that and helping.
Yeah.
And then started cooking them breakfast in the mornings and, just making sure that everybody was fed and taken care of. Yeah. And it just felt real to me. That's how people are. That's one of those things when you grow up, you realize, there's a lot of jerks in the world, but there's a lot of people who maybe have resting bee face who otherwise will step up and be a good,
just do it.
Piece of your family.
Well, and it made me think in some ways, and listeners won't necessarily, it kind of made me think of our grandpa a little bit, who was one of those people. He was just very straightforward about things, and when he helped people, he didn't really care if they liked him for it.
Yeah.
And he didn't really care to be necessarily nice about it. He wasn't mean about it, but it was straightforward. It was
the next right thing.
I'm doing the next right thing, and then I'm going to move on. And he didn't expect anything from you from it, and he didn't explain himself to you. He was just like, I'm going to do something good, and then I'm going to move on. And she kind of gave me that vibe.
Yeah, I really like that about her.
So maybe I'm biased a little bit.
I definitely had the same feel. I like that kind of character, and maybe that is why it felt so real, because we knew someone like that.
Yeah.
Grandma had dementia. That wasn't funny.
It wasn't.
I guess we can kind of. We can't really laugh at it. We can kind of laugh at it. We had a grandma.
We can't just laugh because of things that have happened to us.
We did have a grandmother who died because of complications related to Alzheimer's.
Yeah. The fact that she has dementia isn't funny. The way you said it was funny to me.
But it's also, there's some gallows humor to it because while I didn't find Grandma's depiction of dementia in this book very realistic.
I didn't think it was unrealistic.
I think it was pretty unrealistic. I'm going to say I think it was unrealistic because Grandma's sudden memory of the time-kept box or the item that was forgotten seemed very plot convenient to me.
I do think it was kind of plot convenient, but I do think it's not unrealistic to say that someone suffering from dementia gets tied up in weird things.
Yeah, no, that's true.
Like weird half memories and things. I've seen that happen.
That's fair. I guess maybe what bothered me the most about it is there wasn't any planting. Like they specifically pointed out to us that no one knew what the box was or why it was. Mm-hmm. And she just sort of conveniently remembered it was something her dad talked about her grandpa losing. And her grandpa was the mayor who tried to break the box and didn't pass on the information. And it just seemed not well planted. Yeah,
I would say that, but I wouldn't say that her...
Because of that, though...
It made it harder to sort of,
It almost felt... it was just really... It felt somewhat artificial and convenient to the plot to me.
Well, I definitely think it was. It was there for a purpose, but I don't think that the rest of it was necessarily unrealistic. I think she just sort of used it. She utilized it in a way that felt unrealistic, if that makes sense. Lastly, I want to talk about, and I know you want to talk about the townspeople.
Yes.
I thought they were weird.
They made me think of the townspeople in like Beauty and the Beast. I wrote Disney-esque in my notes.
Yeah, and it's weird because they're all about community and working together, but at one point Lena loses her little sister before a blackout, which is really scary and dangerous because her little sister's a toddler, and loses her and is like looking for her, and all the adults are like, oh, you should have kept an eye on her. Oh, that sucks. Goodbye. Hope you find her. Mm-hmm. And like nobody tries to help her look for her sister, and nobody paid attention to a kid running down the street at all.
That seems unlikely to me.
The only person who cared was Dune. And like, I just don't find that realistic because I'm an adult. And if there is a child by themselves running down the street, I'm like, who's that kid? Where are they going? Where are their parents?
There is a loose child. Someone fix this.
Maybe that's because I was a nanny. I don't know.
Well, I mean, and I would say I work with kids too every day. So like, I also
it's hard to say how much of that is realistic.
Maybe you and I have kind of a tainted perspective.
Hey, Scott, we're going to invite someone onto the podcast briefly. If you see a kid running loose in the street, do you pay attention or do you just move on?
Pay attention.
Okay, so you've heard it from someone who doesn't work with kids.
We have received confirmation from the only other person in this house who lives here who doesn't work with kids, and it's weird. It's weird that no one noticed.
Yeah, it's just weird. You guys tell us what you think. Do you just see a kid and completely forget? Because I just don't think that's real. Mm-mm. And so it was weird that they were so dispassionate about something so very serious.
I agree. It's just, that's bizarre to me. And well, another thing I'd like to bring up with the townspeople is they always seem to be a mass of some sort. Like you have the protest group, you have the religious group, which we didn't even talk about in our note summaries when we were talking to each other about this. I forgot about religion in this book completely.
Oh, I did too. It wasn't really that important.
It wasn't. Religion happens.
They brought up this cult like it was going to be a thing, and then they were like, never mind.
At any rate, the townspeople all seemed very flat and one-dimensional to me. It's sort of that general, all groups of people are mob mentality. They didn't feel like a real city to me in that way.
Yeah.
Like, every character that spoke that we didn't explicitly spend a lot of time with was...
Lala.
Walla, basically. Yeah. And Walla, for those of you who don't know...
Oh yeah, sorry, we're weebs.
We're big old nerds. Walla is a term in voice acting for all of the background chatter you hear that's recorded. And that's usually the voice actors, like, recording in the background, occasionally, you know, getting drunk, just having weird conversations with each other and whispered sounds and weird noises. And that's what makes up all of the background chatter you hear in animation.
But usually when you hear, like, the little side comments, like, oh, did you... Like, those are all unnamed Walla.
What's this?
And it was it felt like that anytime they talked.
Yeah, it felt like... Staged, yeah. It did. It felt very staged. The dialogue felt very stagey and theatrical in a lot of ways. And I think that's why I wrote Disney-esque. I even it felt like every time groups of people are around, we were going to break into a musical number.
I agree.
It just was very weird.
And at one point we did.
And yeah, we did. Oh my God. City of Ember is Disney confirmed.
The setting in this book is really interesting. It is definitely a character.
Yeah, absolutely. The city, I think maybe that's why it was written so flatly, because the character of the city, which we've talked about that idea before, is expressed through the random townspeople.
Yeah. But the city is dark. It's full of existential dread.
Dark.
Yeah, it's a cave. They live in a cave underground. So it's cold and like dark and kind of sad feeling and like damp and like just full of dread. Because everything past the light that they can see is unknown and dangerous. And the book, there is a sort of like looming tension in the air.
Yeah.
Because of it. And I think that tracks with being in a cave, that sort of stagnant feeling.
Yeah.
It was very present in the book. And I thought it gives a lot of, it gives a lot of pressure to the story that wouldn't necessarily exist otherwise.
I will say, Ember as a character, I appreciate that it is one. And I know that it is one because I accidentally skipped over huge chunks of this book in description form. Long-time listeners of this show will know that I jokingly have a thing. I have my Tolkien blinders that I have on. I'm not very good at paying attention to very descriptive, long-winded passages that don't have a lot to do with the plot. And boy, this book is full of those.
It is. Man. I don't typically have that problem, and I zoned out several times in this book talking about descriptions. Like, I was like, wake me up whenever we get to plot.
It was tough, and I think that's a sign that it was probably a very well-crafted world. There's a map and everything. There's a map in the first page of the book.
There is.
And they're
also constantly talking about street names and stuff.
That's even one of the things that we both had in our notes was the fact that street names come up with some significance. I think it's supposed to be referencing, like, streets in like any other city where you know the neighborhood, maybe, but it didn't come across that way to me very effectively. It just sort of came across more like, well, now they're in this named space, which I'm picturing as identical as to the other named space they mentioned before. I
just keep picturing dark streets with street lamps.
Yep. It's pretty much a Victorian Gothic novel.
That's pretty much what I kept seeing in my brain.
It's a weird one. So I think it's interesting that she described locations a lot, but the descriptions of the actual space
were not there.
Yeah. At least as far as I could pay attention to.
Yeah. There were some. I think when they were in the pipes and things like that, there was more attention paid to those sorts of things, but I didn't really care for the street names and like the trying to get me to reference. I don't like, if I feel like I have to reference the map to know where you're at, I get annoyed, which is, I love like Tamara Pierce. She always has maps for her books.
Tamara Pierce has maps for her books, but
she doesn't, I reference them when the characters are traveling or something like that, because I like to know where they're going and like where they are in reference to other things. But a lot of time I don't feel like I have to look at the map to know or to care.
Well, the space that the characters are moving through feels distinct.
Yeah.
And those books, and in many of the books we've discussed. For example, I have very distinct pictures in my mind of what everything looks like from The Giver.
Yeah.
Or even from Charlie Bone. Like, Fidelia's house is, I can see it in my brain. In this, I see a Victorian Gothic novel.
Yes. But that said, there were aspects of it that did feel very vivid and real to me as well. Like when they're in the river, or when they're, there are certain areas that when they're there, I'm like, oh, this feels real to me. Mm-hmm. But as far as traveling from one location to another, I wish she'd just been like running through the streets and like kept going instead of referencing all these places like I'm supposed to know where they are, because I don't. I didn't. I looked at the map, and then I got the audiobook, and then I couldn't look at the map anymore.
Are we going to talk about the audiobook?
We are going to talk about the audiobook, but not yet. I don't want to get off track because I got a lot to say.
Also, the outside world as a setting, you had a really interesting point about that.
Well, so this book did, we both kind of agreed this book took a lot from The Giver. It was, I think, heavily inspired by The Giver. I'd like to know if the author has read The Giver or just magically knows so much about it. But
everybody
this is another
escaping from it. If we've learned anything from this podcast, everybody is stealing from The Giver and 1984 and Brave New World.
So this is another book where the author has to explain common things as though they're new, kind of like The Giver. She's explaining the outside world when they first escape and get out into the open sky, but she's having to explain it as though we don't know what it is, but she can't. There are several points where she goes to explain it and she uses the word landscape.
Which is not a word they would have.
Which isn't a word that they would have. And several other words that they use that I'm like, you wouldn't know this word. You don't know what this is.
And I don't blame the author for that. I blame the editor. That's something an editor should have caught.
Well, but to the same extent, it's like you've gotta relate to the readers what you're saying.
Yeah.
So, but they even talk about the burning ball of light. I'm like, how do you know it's burning? Because it's warm?
Because it's bright.
Like
electricity doesn't burn in your experience. Like, because it explicitly states, other than fire, the only experience with light these people have is electric light. Yeah. Everything is lit electrically in their town through a massive water generator.
Yeah. So it's just stuff like that I thought was really interesting, that she was trying really hard, and I appreciated the effort because I like that kind of things in books. I like
when authors challenge themselves.
Yes, and I like to do that. Like even in again, we've told you guys we're nerds, but even in that D&D campaign I want to run, I want to describe things like they've never existed before.
Exactly.
And so I think that that's a really fun concept, and it's really fun to watch authors do that. Mm-hmm. However, she fell back on those terms a couple of times, and it took me out of it because I was like, they wouldn't know that word. Yeah. They wouldn't know that word. They wouldn't know what that is. Like when they meet that dog, I thought that was cool, but they there were a couple of things.
It wasn't a dog, it was a fox.
Was it a fox?
I'm pretty sure it was a fox. It had a triangle face and a bushy tail.
That's true.
And was the size of a toddler.
But they talked about a bushy tail, and I guess they would know what tails are because of rats maybe, but it was just kind of
weird. And thinking of birds as huge bugs.
Yeah.
Huge weird
bugs. Well, that
bugs.
I kind of thought was fun because they wouldn't know that they're birds. But also I don't know, there were just a couple things that they said that I was just kind of you wouldn't know what that is.
Yeah.
If you don't know what a candle is or a boat is, and you've never seen a landscape, and you've never seen, you wouldn't know. So it was cool, but
that's part of, this book is a lot. So, one of the things sort of related to Ember in particular, I think that's important because it's kind of important to the plot, but it's how they use time.
Yeah.
And this
time exists, but it doesn't matter.
Exactly.
It's like Whose Line.
Basically, there's a ticking clock, but it doesn't matter.
And they changed the date.
Yeah.
And it actually talks about in the book that time doesn't matter. It's kind of
it does.
Sometimes people leave the date up for days because they forget to change it. And sometimes they forget to change the clock and people have to stay at work for a couple extra hours. And I'm like, okay, if I was the clock runner and I was going to forget the time, I'd forget it in the morning so everyone could sleep in.
Yeah. That sounds like a great way to get tarred and feathered by the other townspeople, honestly.
Yeah, I would not be like, oh, I forgot to change it so you had to stay at work for 3 extra hours. I'd be like, oh, I forgot to change it. Everyone got to sleep in for 3 extra hours. How are these people not nocturnal by now?
Right. Well, yeah.
But it doesn't really matter. The passage of time is not really important.
Yeah.
It is, but it isn't.
And in that same vein, however, I think that causes issues with pacing.
I agree.
I think I like that she made the fact that time doesn't matter both explicit in the dialogue and explicit in the behavior of the characters in the text of the book.
Yeah.
However, the pacing of this book is really weird.
Yeah, okay, so it was a very tightly woven story. She didn't try to throw in too many plot elements, which I appreciated, but the pacing of it made it feel...
It suffered from E.L. James syndrome. Everything in this book happened in 3 days. I don't...
No, it's not even that it was like... I felt like parts of it dragged for no reason, and then parts of it rushed for no reason, and it felt like there was more plot than there was because it dragged in parts. Like, I was like, I feel like we could move on.
Yeah, there were moments, she didn't elaborate on things that I think would have added a lot of depth to the book.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, I think this book needs to be about 100 pages longer to be a good book.
I agree.
I think it needed work on pacing, and it really could use elaboration on the religious elements in the city. They get touched on, they become personalized, they get planted, they get reminder, but we never get a payoff.
No payoff. Well, I have another thing that I think would have helped this book a lot, but first I want to talk about the tonal whiplash, as well as the fact that it is an actual live action allegory of the cave. But the tonal whiplash, like, we both kind of wanted to talk about that. I think it's very...
Okay, so it's obvious to me. We didn't really preface this episode much.
We didn't. I forgot my preface, guys.
How dare you? But this is another one of those books that really, I think we both remembered it being...
better.
Well, not necessarily better, because I don't think it's bad.
No, you're right. It's
I think
not bad.
we both remembered it being older, I guess. Because...
we were younger, maybe?
Maybe. I feel like we read this... Yeah, I mean, we read it when you were in middle school, since you stole it from the middle school. We would have been at the right age for it, but reading it feels like a children's book.
This book is the most... It felt the most like a children's book to me that we've read so far.
I don't know. I'd say it could go head to head with Charlie Bone.
I would say this one the themes of this one were better.
Yeah.
But the way it was written felt more like a children's book.
Starting with how the adult characters talk to the 12-year-olds. These kids are ostensibly supposed to be adults. They have jobs. They're able to take care of their 2-year-old siblings and dementia grandparents on a single income, which we got to talk about the socialism in this at some point.
Yeah, not yet.
Not yet. We're getting there. All the adults talk to the kids in the same way I see adult teachers talk to very young children. Yeah. Not how I see adults talk to 12-year-olds.
Yeah. But I also feel like they kind of talk a little bit like very young children.
They do. And I was kind of doing some digging. This book, from what I could tell, is kind of rated for an even younger reading level than the primary characters are aged at. And
I felt like they were younger sometimes.
But that's all exactly. But that's also a problem for me.
I agree.
Because at the same time, this book has some extremely dark themes that pop up, in my opinion, that
would benefit from being explored.
Yeah, that would benefit from being explored with a more mature tone.
So that's what I was going to say. I think the biggest problem with the book was. Yeah. When you were talking about it, is she has really cool ideas with really cool kind of gritty, dark themes that could be explored in a teen-friendly way, and she handles the entire book with kid gloves.
Exactly. And I can tell you from experience, 12-year-olds are a lot smarter and more cynical than we give them credit for.
No, 100%.
I had an 8-year-old at my job roll his eyes at me the other day.
Yeah, 8-year-olds roll their eyes.
And I felt it in my soul. You guys.
But I think... it's...
Give your kids some credit, man. Give your audience some credit.
I stayed up all night reading this book in middle school. I remember reading this book.
Because it's, in a lot of ways, it's extremely compelling. The themes are extremely compelling.
It's very compelling. And I remember when I was younger thinking there were really cool aspects of it, but wishing there had been more depth to it and feeling like Lena and Dune were kind of shallow a little bit. Yeah. And that was me as a kid So now looking back on it, like, I really feel that way. I really, like, there are so many things that if she hadn't been afraid of her audience understanding too much, kind of.
Yeah.
Like,
I worry. I think I don't necessarily she was worried about them being, like, understanding too much. I think she was probably more concerned about freaking them out, which I get. Like, this is a book, especially if this is a book inspired by the Cold War. I know I've had conversations with our dad before about his experiences living under the threat of nuclear war. Because our dad's a Gen Xer. He grew up under threat of the bomb, under Reagan, you know. And I remember him saying it was awful all the time. Like, I'd stay up at night just wondering. Dreading it.
Yeah.
And I can see maybe an author wanting to spare an audience that, especially a younger teen audience. However, that goes against the purpose and the theming of the book.
Yeah, that's the thing that gets
So it just sort of felt like a pulled punch, I guess. Yeah. For lack of a better term.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly what it was.
To speak to that, the dialogue is a bit clunky, and I think that's
very blocky.
Why it reads so young in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it definitely reads really young, because there were parts of it that I was like, "Well, this is dark," but then it read really young. And the dialogue in specific, I wanted to talk about when Dune finds out that Lena's grandmother died. He goes, "Oh, that's so sad." That's his dialogue.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so sad.
And she's relieved to the point of tears that someone cares.
But, like, and I listened to the audiobook, so it sounded horrible. I was like, you got anything else there, bud?
I get to add a little nuance to it because I read the book.
The audiobook reader, I didn't feel like she added any nuance to it. It was, oh, that's so sad.
That's hilarious.
And then she kind of backtracks and tries to, like, but it was too late.
It's so sad.
I was just like, I can't believe that this just happened. And I had to pause it, and then I went back and listened again, and then I took it off because I was listening to it sped up because I was in a hurry. So I took it off and put it on regular speed. It's like, clearly there's no way it can sound that terrible. So I put it on regular speed and listened again, and it was just, oh, that's so sad. And I was like, it's not better. Like, it's just as bad.
It's still bad.
And that's just my example of how the dialogue felt really, like,
That's awkward. A really good example. Because that took me out of the book for a second, too, when I read that. I was like, and then Lena's reaction to that is to well up with tears and give him a huge hug and say thank you. And
he's just like, okay.
Like, no, he hugs her, actually.
I know, but he's just, like, kind of bewildered by it, which, like, me too, because all he said was, oh, that's so sad, but I mean, go off, I guess. Yeah, we have to move on. Yeah, I gotta move on, but
oh, man.
I did think it was interesting talking about their ages. There isn't necessarily an inherent romance in this book, plot-wise. Yeah. However,
we did talk about this before, like, in the script process, because we are professionals. Sometimes. We discussed something that really stood out to me in particular, kind of related to our last episode, which was holes. I talked a little bit about the fact that Stanley Yelnats and all the boys in Sacker's book, seemed kind of sexless to me, and that sort of took me out of the story because that's not my experience around 14-year-old boys.
Yeah.
In this book, however, without being, I thought it was a really excellent example of how to do romantic interest from a young character in a book without being explicit about it.
Yeah.
Because, and we mentioned The Giver before, but it kind of goes back to that scene in The Giver where our main character is talking about the feeling of wanting in his first sexy dream.
Mm-hmm.
That's what all of the Dune thinking about Lena scenes felt like without explicitly stating it.
There's a part where she's running and he says she was running in that long-legged way of hers with her hair blowing behind her. And I was like, oh, buddy.
Aw, yeah. There's just lots of moments like that where, like, the way, like, and the one that stood out in particular to me was when he was talking about whether or not she would make it, what he was going to do when he was waiting for her to show up so they could run away and escape the city. he's saying he wanted her to come with him.
Yeah.
He wanted her to come.
Yeah.
And that's the line that sort of triggered that thought about the giver and how I kind of related it to that.
Yeah.
And why I wanted to bring it up, because it came up before. And I'm a believer in showing good examples as well as bad. And it was a very good example of...
Yeah, I think they did she did a good job of that.
I agree.
She handled it really well. And Lena is a little bit more, I think, friendship-oriented right now. Yes. I think she's definitely drawn to Doom a little bit, but it wasn't as... And I think that's accurate, too, to young girls. Yeah. And, like, not necessarily feeling anything yet, but definitely feeling like something's a little different. Whereas I think Dune is a little bit more captivated by Lena at this point.
Yeah. Definitely think the implication there... He really self-hates himself for rage a lot. I think the implication there is when their friendship fell apart, he was embarrassed because she in particular laughed at him.
Yeah.
And there are references in the book to how he feels like he always messes things up by getting angry. And I wonder if that might have been an earlier example of that.
Maybe. I didn't think about that.
I think for sure he's got the hots for Lena, though.
Definitely. I thought they did a really good... Why do I keep saying they? I thought DuPrau did a good job of utilizing the lack of color.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, she does use color as well, but she uses a lack of color a lot, and I thought it was well done. This is the first time we've seen, other than The Giver,
yes,
which again, we've already said we think a lot of this has some Giver ties, but other than The Giver, this is the first book that we've read that uses the lack of color in a really poignant way.
Yeah. I would agree with that. Even when they get out of Ember, the quality of color and how it's described changes because the light quality is different. And just that sort of exploration of shades of darkness. Mm-hmm. I mean, shout out to all my Pratchett fans out there. I'm also a big Pratchett. I'm a huge fan of the Night's Watch series, part of Discworld, the Discworld series by Terry Pratchett. And there is a book that takes place largely underground that talks about dwarves having lots of different names for qualities of darkness. That sort of came into my brain. She did have a lot of variety in how she described space in the book. And that's impressive because not all those spaces had street names. Sorry.
But no, she uses, like, Lena getting colored pencils is a big deal. And all of her pictures are drawn without color. All of their clothes have faded in color because they're old. Everything's old and everything is been used and everything is being reused and patched. And I just think she used that lack of color, that sort of people's longing for color a lot. And I liked that. I thought it was well done. That sort of...
And that, we'll talk about that later on too, but I really want to talk about how expression is used in this book, because that honestly is a big part of why I landed on the rating I landed on for the literary merit of this book. But I think otherwise, I think the use of color is kind of weak symbolism. It doesn't seem to have a strong purpose. It just seems to be brought up a lot. The lack of color is more symbolic than the use of color, even though specifically blue is brought up a lot, and specifically red is brought up a lot. Red is her cape color. Red is the color of... What's the other red thing? There's another prominently red thing. Mm-hmm. I don't remember. I didn't write it down. I'm a professional.
Blue, I think, was supposed to be, like, the sky. Well, and it seems really dumb. Not dumb. I'm sorry. That's mean. I just mean, like, it felt shallow to me. Like, the symbolism wasn't very strong, even though it was obviously planted on purpose. But the lack of color was stronger. It was more poignant and more, meant more, I think. And I agree with you. I think the lack of color as a symbol for the experience of oppression specifically, and not necessarily oppression by a government. The government in this universe is basically incompetent, but the oppression of lack of resources, just the oppression of poverty. And color maybe works really well as a symbol of expression just on its own, but the specific colors I don't think and
land as a symbol. I think that's what they were meant to be when they were written into the story. Yeah,
because they wanted a blue door, and she wanted a blue pencil.
And Clary wears a blue shirt.
Yeah, it was just blue came up a lot, and I just kind of felt like it was just Lena's favorite color.
Yeah.
Even though other people specifically mentioned blue, it was just like, blue is Lena's favorite color.
It just came up a lot.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was kind of weak symbolism specifically. I thought more effective and probably, it felt like more accidental, but I could be wrong. I don't want to take credit away from the author, but the use of clutter as a symbol I thought was really effective. And it was really effective world building. I
did like the clutter everywhere, but what did you think necessarily that it was symbolic of?
Just the encroaching end. Basically. I mean, it's just a reinforcement of the theme of, like, existential dread.
It definitely felt very, like, I don't mean this, very, like, hoardery.
Yeah.
And not in, like, these people are hoarders, but in a, like, that feeling of helplessness that comes with hoarding.
Yeah.
Even
like
though they
lack of control.
Yeah, and it wasn't that they were wanting to hoard necessarily. It was a necessity. But because of it, they had that lack of control that comes with having stuff everywhere because you've got to use all of it. And I thought that was a really interesting thing because usually books go with the having nothing side as a lack of control, and this one had having too much as
but too much of nothing.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't stuff they could use necessarily. It was just, you don't throw anything out because you might be able to use it, and because there's no way to get a new thing.
Yeah.
And, like, that's sort of, like, that kind of leads pretty neatly into our discussion of socialism. But but before we moved on, I really wanted to talk about the box. You had asked me early on if you thought it was a MacGuffin, or if I thought it was a MacGuffin. And I think I'm on the fence about it, but I don't think it is. But I do still maintain that it is a literary Pandora's box.
I don't know. I don't know. It maybe. Well, okay, the reason I see where you're coming from, and I don't think you're wrong.
And it was literally left to them by the gods as far as the city is concerned. The people who have religion believe the builders are going to return, which felt a bit pointed.
Yeah, but okay, so the builders left this box, and it wasn't supposed to be opened until a specific time, and it got opened earlier, and that caused havoc. So that aspect, yes, Pandora's box. The opening of the box and all of that, but...
It didn't get opened earlier, though.
Yeah, it did.
The old man didn't open the box. He just dented it. It opened in the back of their closet.
Oh, that's right. It opened on its own. You're right.
So it was really just, I think there's something to... I think you could argue that the box is some sort of, symbolism of some sort.
Yeah.
But beyond, the surface level, the idea of it being that, unleashing of change upon the world... Mm-hmm. And to some extent, the unleashing of both chaos and hope upon the world, I think is interesting. And I think could lead to a really interesting metaphor in the sequel to this book. I'd look forward to finding that out. I've never read the sequel to this book. I was just happy with the way it ended.
I was too, actually. I was years later, I found out there was a sequel. Years later. And I was like, oh, this is really good. I thought the ending was really interesting. Yeah. It was very and then they escaped. And I had never thought, I was always curious, I was like, oh, I wonder what happened, that sort of fan fiction-y, I want more. And I would have talked about that a little bit more in a little bit, but later I found out that there was a sequel and was like, oh, really? So I read it. There's 2 more sequels after that I've never read. I didn't know that they existed either.
Yeah.
This is a very understated sequel style.
Yeah. And I think it's because thematically the story should have ended there. Well,
and I remember, I don't want to talk about the second book too much, but I remember it having different
characters in it.
No, it's the same characters. It's sort of different themes. Similar, they kind of branch off from this, but it's sort of entering a new society and really, I definitely see her Cold War thoughts on that one, of them trying to incorporate into a new society with new people and having to figure out how to live together in harmony after being so different, but also still those themes of me versus community, things like that. So it fits, but it doesn't have to happen. It was almost like she finished it and was like, I want more, so I'm going to write more, and I'm cool with that.
Yeah, that's fine. I don't
think she intended to write a sequel when she finished this book.
This is the rare case where I'm happy with a more ambiguous ending, and I'm really, I thought it was, the way the book ended felt right for the story. Yeah. So I'm not sure I'm team sequel necessarily, but The Giver has a sequel too, and I'm going to read that someday, so and you never know.
The fan fiction thing I wanted to say was, I would love for DC to get a hold of this book and make a movie. They like to make everything like gritty, dark and like sad.
Somebody call Zack Snyder.
Yeah, like I want to give Zack Snyder
version of City of Ember.
I want the Zack Snyder version of this book, and I can't believe I'm saying that because everything that he touches I get annoyed with, but like I want his version of this book as a movie because I watched the movie for this and it was worse.
Honestly, it sounds like a good time.
Yeah. Like I wanted to explore a lot of the themes of this book a lot more, and I would love to see an aged up version of it.
I think part of the problem, like I said, I think just another 100 pages would have really sealed the deal on this and just given it a little more room to explore some of the things she was getting at. I think it got cut too much. I think too much got cut in this book. Or not enough got written, one or the other. But to that end, one of the things I really do like in this compliment sandwich is how she plays with expression. It wasn't really a big part of the plot necessarily. It also wasn't a very big part of the theme necessarily, but it was present throughout the entire book. Actually, I would argue that it's part of the theme to an extent because I think there's an element related to the spark of life part of things that we were talking about. Like there's a caterpillar that becomes a butterfly.
You haven't made your original point. So
I'm sorry.
It's okay. I'm trying to put it together, and you're going off too far. I'm going to get lost.
I want to talk about how she uses expression and how that relates to something called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Now, I am aware that Maslow's hierarchy of needs is a very outdated idea in sociology and anthropology. However, I do think it's valuable for literary and philosophical reasons.
Do you think we need to explain what that is?
I think it wouldn't hurt. Maslow's hierarchy of needs is a theory that humans can only reach certain heights of productivity and creativity if certain types of needs are met. For example, on the bottom of this pyramid, it's usually shown as a pyramid, you have basic needs like shelter, food, air conditioning, the basics. Like, do you have everything you need to survive?
I don't think air conditioning counts as a necessity.
It was a joke.
I know. Wi-Fi.
Wi-Fi, obviously.
No, those are comfort.
Those things are all necessities in order for a person to even be able to begin to be creative. Like, no one would have been painting on caves if they were starving to death. And the next rung up is more of your comfort needs met, and then you become more productive and more creative and more capable in more esoteric pursuits like art and writing. And I think that comes out a lot in how drawing is referred to in the book. For starters, characters draw. It's not really encouraged. It's not really discouraged.
They just do it.
They just do it. It's just a thing that people do to pass the time because it's not like they have TV. And I think that's interesting. Like, it's an interesting detail to include. But specifically, there's a lot of importance put on Lena's drawings of her, fantasy city that she has in her dreams. And there's a lot of importance expressed towards the songs that the whole town sings at the end of the book. And I think it's an interesting element to include in the story. Yeah. I guess is where I was going with it. Like, I think there's a lot to mine there, but I was hoping you would have more to say in response to what I was saying.
Oh, sorry, I was letting you go.
Jump in any time.
I run out. Well, yeah, I think it's definitely they have all of, it's weird because they're running out of resources, but they have all of the comfort necessary to have artistic pursuits.
Exactly. I guess that's more, thank you.
Yes.
I get lost in my explanations sometimes.
And I think that ties into what we were talking about with like socialism too.
Yeah.
Like this idea that they're all here to help one another
and still not somehow?
Yeah. It's weird.
So
that's what I got.
So basically, when it comes to the relationship between expression and Maslow's hierarchy of needs, what I'm trying to say is, I think it exists. We should probably talk about it. We don't have much to say.
I think I don't know how intentional it is.
I guess it felt very intentional in some points, especially when we come to the songs in the story.
Yeah, the songs. So we said they have a musical number, and they do, by golly.
They super do.
So they have a day of maybe the year. I don't know. It's hard to say. Time doesn't matter.
Yeah, time doesn't matter.
But they have a day of singing.
Yeah.
Where they all rehearse.
It's everybody's holiday.
Everybody gets off work, and they all just hang out in the middle of town, and they sing 3 songs, and then I guess they go home.
Somehow not one of those songs is the Who song from How the Grinch Stole Christmas. Honestly, which I kept expecting to see the lyrics for pop up in the book a little bit.
But it basically was, like, the Song of Darkness was really interesting to me because, the name makes it sound terrible and sad, and apparently it sounds, like, somber, but it's all about how they're the only light in the darkness because their city is all that exists. And it's so, like, dark and existential just in that aspect of it. But I don't remember my point.
Well, it kind of helps me bring it back to what I was trying.
Right, I knew I was trying to help you.
You're getting there.
I forgot why I started saying
that. Was the other part that she puts particular importance on singing and music in that regard. Like everybody rehearses for this thing. It's a whole big thing. Like it's a holiday. As far as I can tell, it's the only holiday.
Yeah.
Which, sad.
Yeah.
So it's something everybody looks forward to and practices for. And it's just a communal act of artistic expression.
Yeah.
And a community, and they literally sing louder to, I kind of had a moment where I thought about La Marseillaise from Casablanca, the scene where all of the French people start singing their national anthem to the Germans. It made me, there's a moment when all of the lights go out and there's a big blackout while they're in the middle of their song, the Song of Darkness, and they just start singing louder. But
honestly, that actually made me feel feelings a little bit. No, it
super does.
Like, that part was really well written.
But that's, I guess, what I was going for more is, it's sort of a subversion of that idea that humans need to have a need met in order to need a type of expression.
And she's saying
that's where I was going.
The expression will happen regardless.
Exactly. And I super agree with that. I think that's a really important thing to say to young people, especially young adults, because that expression might be more important than meeting the needs.
At that moment, it definitely certainly was.
Exactly.
Like, it was very much singing this together in the darkness is going to give us hope
and strength
and the ability to soldier on and not panic.
Exactly.
And it was beautifully written, and it felt beautiful.
Yeah.
Like, it felt like if I had been there, I would have cried.
Yeah. That's why I said it. I am 30 years old. I've seen the movie Casablanca 800,000 times.
And it gets you every time.
And that scene gets me every time.
I know.
Every time.
Yeah, it's well done.
It is, and
I don't know how intentional it was.
I think it was maybe intentional. I think it might have just been an expression of the author's belief that expression is more important sometimes than a basic need. And I think on its own is a basic need for humans. I mean, there are bone flutes older than documented human tools, like other human tools. Like the pentatonic scale
She's going to go on an art rant.
I'm going on an art rant.
No, we gotta.
I went to 6 years of art school.
I know, and you'll use it.
I'm going to use
not
it.
Here.
Okay. But my point is, there are art pieces as old as tools.
Yeah.
That we can date back in humanity.
We need artistic expression to relate to one another.
Exactly.
And
I think it's an
connected.
important part of being a human.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think she does a really good job bringing that out. And I'm sorry it took me so long to get to that point.
No, you're fine. It's all right.
Oh my gosh.
We both struggled there.
It was a hard one.
We knew where we were going, but not how we were going to get there. So, yeah, the only other things, I know you like to talk about puberty symbolism, and I actually found some.
You did?
So there's a caterpillar that Dune has found that wraps itself in a cocoon, and it is very much doing double duty as a symbol. It's very much a symbol of life finds a way, which is a common theme in the book, but it's also, I think, symbolic of Dune growing as a person and becoming something new.
Exactly.
And puberty.
And that's the moment when we start hearing him use language like he wanted her to come.
Yeah.
And things like that.
Yeah. And I think also the colored pencils a little bit for Lena. That was the first time we see her wanting something.
Yeah.
And she talks about it being corrupted by something good and being selfish, but I didn't really feel that way. I felt it was her wanting something more than what she had, seeing something and wanting it for herself and wanting it for her own creative pursuits. But also I thought to an extent it was a symbol of her puberty sort of kicking in a little bit.
Wanting something for it.
Yeah. And not quite as in your face as Dune's, but certainly there.
Yeah, I think I'm a big fan of puberty symbolism. I'm all about it. I also think her bean sprout to some extent was pulling some double duty.
Yeah.
She's given a bean sprout and it grows on its own.
Symbolism can definitely have duality, and some of this symbolism did.
And that's something, we mentioned earlier when we were discussing this that we wanted to talk about as a point towards the meta theme of this podcast, which is literary critiques.
Yeah.
And it's just sort of important, I think, to point out to people who may not know that symbolism is A, it doesn't have to be intentional to be symbolic. B, symbols can mean more than one thing at one time. And sometimes that makes them even more interesting as literary techniques. Sometimes it makes them a little unfocused. I think in this book it's pretty effective because it ties back into that sort of spark of life element that I think is part of puberty symbolism.
Yeah, it worked.
So I agree. Dreams?
Yeah, some.
Well, no, I was just going to talk about dreams.
Oh.
I thought we were done.
Yeah, dreams are good.
But before we got to tropes, I wanted to talk about dreams.
Well, I want to talk about the audiobook, so you can talk about dreams and then I'll talk about the audiobook.
Did we already talk about socialism?
Yeah, we did.
Okay.
A little.
We're not going to touch on it more than that.
They're socialists.
They're kind of socialist.
It works out. Let's go.
Everybody has a lot of what feel like prophetic dreams in this book that serve no purpose, and I want to know why.
Who has Lena, yeah.
She has dreams. Grandma has dreams.
Yeah. I thought that Lena had been outside before. I thought that maybe she had actually been smuggled out of the city before, because I was like, she's dreaming about the sky. She's dreaming about, maybe she's been there and she just doesn't know why. But, that didn't happen, and so I was like, how does she dream? How does she know? How? Is this just, passed down to the generations?
Is this sort of, sort of genetic memory of the sky?
Oh, also, we didn't talk about this character, but briefly, I want to give a shout-out to the lady who kept the journal.
Yeah.
I appreciated her for that.
Thank you, lady who kept the journal. We needed that plot dump. It was helpful. But grandma dreams. The dreams come up quite a few times throughout the story, but they don't seem to serve any purpose.
They're just there to let us know, to reinforce what they've already spelled out for us.
Yeah. They don't seem to have much symbolic value. They're not prophetic. They aren't there to really reinforce anything the characters are going through. They are just dreams that all the characters have, and sometimes they're scary.
And sometimes they're true.
Yeah. So I just thought the dreams thing was a little unfocused. I would have rather that stuff got cut out in favor of pursuing more of the religion of the builders, which only gets touched on. Yeah. And also, what do you do when your boss invites you to church? Yeah. Because that's happened to me. Yeah. And it's weird. And that happened in this book, and I felt it, and it was a great thing to include in a book, I thought.
So the audiobook. I'm not going to say who read the audiobook I listened to, because it's not fair to her, because I don't want to take away from what she did. I will say this. The audiobook had Foley. So anytime we were down by the river,
or in the pipeworks,
we could hear the river for the most part, if it was relevant. And like when they opened heavy doors, there were heavy doors being opened. There's a point 451 there's a point where the mayor is speaking through a loudspeaker and you can barely hear him, and they did like a loudspeaker sound. Like they tried. So for me, my doing the most was whoever did the sound editing for this audiobook. They tried so hard.
VIP Foley guy.
So I wanted to talk about the Foley.
Gender Foley person.
I also wanted to talk about like so they had Foley and they were trying real hard there. They said Lena wrong, and maybe it's supposed to be Lina. But
it's not. They pronounce it in the book.
Yeah, so she called her Lina through the whole book, and it drove me nuts because I've read this book before, and I was like, it's Lena.
Literally, Poppy mimics saying Lena's name and can't quite say the L sound and says, Ina! That's how you know it's Lena.
So that was kind of frustrating to me. I think she read so slow. Oh. I had it on 2 speed the whole time. And like it was a little fast because I was in a hurry. But like when I tried to slow it down to 1.5 when I had a bit more time, I was like, nope, It's too slow still. Yeah, I put it back on 2 speed.
You played a brief clip on 2 speed for me while I was making dinner, and it cracked me up because it sounded like the delivery was really fast. Like how she said the words was really fast, but all of the information still came to me at a very slow pace.
The slowest pace possible.
It was very weird.
It was very frustrating. Yeah. I had a lot of opinions about this audiobook. I had another thing I wanted to say about it, but it's lost to me now. But
Mostly because we've had time and the rage is gone.
Yeah, I think so. But really, like, it was a lot.
I will say, I listened to the sample of the audiobook and I actually listened to a little bit of a fan audiobook on YouTube. So holla to the YouTube person who did a fan recording of this entire book. You're an American hero, and I think you did a pretty good job. I didn't listen for long, though, because it was just faster to read the book. But even the fan reading was way faster than that, and I knew it was going to be too slow for me to get through it in time.
Yeah. Yeah, she just took too long, and she just, it wasn't bad. It was just...
Not the choices you would have made.
Yeah. I think, yeah. Also, the other thing about listening to the audiobook, I will let you guys know, this is not a good medium. Oh, yeah. The audiobook is not a good medium for this book because they find these torn up instructions, and I kept feeling like I was having a stroke because she would just say like
they have to piece together instructions like a crossword puzzle.
Like, it's a mystery. This book does a good job of feeling mysterious, and part of the mystery is them piecing together these instructions. But hearing someone try to read these instructions out loud so that it's clear but not too clear feels like having a stroke.
I know we don't have, like, outro music or anything, but I think we should just have that.
Just have me reading the puzzle for the outro.
Just include that snippet of the audiobook for a loop.
So that is my piece on the audiobook. Did you have anything else you wanted to say about the book before we do our tropes count?
No.
All right. I counted 4 out of 14. I got dead parents and orphans. What?
That's just your delivery on that, sorry.
Adults decide your life at age 12, plus a bonus point.
Bonus points!
Because they're lottery style, so maybe it should be 5 out of 14, but
yes,
it's a lottery style. Puberty symbolism, and person is a lamp. I put Dune with a question mark, but I also put Poppy, her little sister.
Oh, we didn't really talk about Poppy because Poppy's not really a character. Poppy's just a force of nature.
Poppy just exists as Lena's little sister that she's supposed to take care of, and she continues to lose. And then at the very end, like, Poppy goes with them, but really, like, Poppy didn't have to exist.
No.
Like, maybe for the responsibility aspect, but overall, it was just kind of like, eh.
Poppy was not Gabe by any stretch of the imagination.
No, Poppy was not Gabe from The Giver.
They should know. They definitely have listened to all of our episodes.
If you guys have listened to this point, thank you so much.
Yes, you're heroes, all of you.
Literary merit. Oh, wait, did you get 4? Oh, sorry, I got distracted. Person is a lamp. Poppy. That's my last one. 4 out of 14. Did you get any others?
I haven't been keeping track, because I know you have.
Jessica!
I'm sorry.
Get it together. Be a professional.
I won't.
Literary merit.
I'll be honest, I gave everything 3s across the board.
I gave literary merit a 3. I think it's a real life allegory of the cave, which we didn't really discuss as much as I would have liked. Yeah. But I think it doesn't really need to be. If you guys have read Allegory of the Cave, it's,
you know the drill.
Yeah, this is
We've all been in middle school.
This is a really good introduction to that. I think
that's on my tropes list. Allegory of the Cave. It is? Yeah, we were supposed to add it, remember?
Oh, well then 5 out of 15. Yeah. We've been counting wrong this whole time. No.
I'm sorry.
It's definitely an allegory of the cave in that...
It's about seeking the truth, and what the truth is a moral life, and what is that?
And I love allegory. I love allegory of the cave stories. Like, The Truman Show really messes with my brain, but also I love it. Like, I'll talk about it a lot, because I want a modern... Okay, I'm not going to go on my weird rant about my modern remake of that show, but I really want that to be a modern remake, where it's like conspiracy theory. Anyway.
It would be a great Netflix show.
It would be so good.
Especially Netflix, in the world of social media. Netflix, remake The Truman Show as a show.
With a Gen Zer as like the main character. Anyway.
Sorry.
Point being, I love Allegory of the Cave stories. And so I think that's why this resonated with me so much when I was younger. And I think it could be so powerful if it were sort of aged up.
I think so. I think it lacks the bite I've grown accustomed to as an adult reader.
I agree.
However, I gave it a 3 on literary merit for a few reasons.
I didn't give it just for that.
Right. But like, I think this book has a lot of value as a kind of an initial first dystopian novel for young adults. And I think that's what it is for a lot of young adults these days is... I made the joke when we were talking about our notes, but baby's first dystopia. I don't want to be dismissive, but in a way, that's what it is. It's a really good entry level. This is what a bad society can look like. These are some of the questions that can come up.
But it's gentle about it.
Exactly. Gentle is a good word. It's a gentle dystopia in that way. And I think that's good for a 12, 13-year-old just getting into that kind of genre fiction. Having a young adult option that doesn't launch you straight into The Giver, which maybe is not great for every 12-year-old to start off with.
I think it is.
I mean, I don't think it's bad. I just think it's a lot, and I could see
a bit stronger.
It is a lot stronger. It's definitely got that literary bite that we mentioned.
It does.
So I think it's good in a lot of ways, and in a lot of ways, I could use a little bit of punching up.
Yeah. Overall opinion, I gave it a 3. You said you gave straight 3s, so I don't need to ask you what you gave it. For entertainment, I gave it a 2.7. I didn't quite give it a 3. I almost gave it a 3. I think it was a little less entertaining for me now that I'm older. Yeah. And I think the audiobook had a lot to do with that too, and the fact that I was in a hurry. So I don't know that I gave it as high as I probably would have if I had leisurely sat down and reread it, because I think the audiobook really tainted my view.
That's fair. I think I gave it a 3, partly because I enjoyed it so much when I was a young teen, and partly because I think there's a lot of value in the themes.
I agree.
And it's a really fun read.
It's compelling.
For 3 hours of your day, if you're a fast reader, for 5 if you're on the slower side as, a reader. I mean, I'd even argue if you're a very slow reader, it might take you 2 days to read this book. Yeah. And I think that's a good thing. It's a good thing to have a genre books like this should be quicker reads. And I think that's lovely. I'm glad that she stuck to that convention.
Yeah. I think it's good. I would almost round up to a 3, but I wrote 2.7 and I think it's the audiobook and I guess I'll stick with it.
That's fair. Stick to your guns. And a little bit of math, and we have a total score for this book of 2.95.
Nice. Okay, so it's what, meh?
I don't know. You're the one with the chart.
I know. I wasn't turned to the chart. I'm sorry. Yeah, it's meh.
Meh. Yeah, this gets a meh. Honestly, I think it's worth a read if you're in the right age range for it. I think if you're interested in studying young adult genre fiction, it's probably one that you need to have in your list.
I agree.
Just because it's considered a young adult classic these days. It's certainly an older children's classic. I definitely think if that's your field, you should read it. But if you are just looking for a really strongly written science fiction film, maybe, or science fiction book, maybe, that may not be for you.
Yeah, it's science fiction-y, but it's not really science fiction. I think it's worth a read if you just want something like brain candy.
Yeah, I think so. It's a solid book.
It's not too much, but it's not going to make you sit and like really think all day.
You're not wasting your time if you spend 3 hours reading.
Yeah. But it's quick read, and it's not like, you do think about it a little and then you stop.
Yeah.
Though sometimes I will catch myself thinking about this book.
I have, and I've thought about it as an adult since the first time I read it. But now I wonder if maybe I just won't think about it anymore now that I've read it again.
I think you will.
I wonder how much I built it up in my own head.
The impression that it left when I was younger changed the way I thought about some things.
Yeah.
So I think I will still think of it fondly always and remember it in moments. But looking as an adult now, I don't think if I had read it for the first time just now, I don't think it would have much of an impact on me. But because I read it when I was younger, it formed some of my thoughts.
So if you're in the age group, it's definitely read it. If you
are vaguely interested.
If you're vaguely interested, might as well. If it's in your field, you should read it. Otherwise, it's okay if you don't read this one.
Don't watch the movie, though.
I didn't know there was a movie.
Don't watch this is not like Holes. This is not like Holes. I repeat.
I like that we didn't say don't watch the movie for the James Patterson episode.
I want someone to watch it and talk to me about it. I haven't finished it, but
we tried.
Jenna Marbles is the queen, and she was part of it. And I can't. I want to watch it. But I can't.
We tried to watch it.
We did. We didn't get far.
It didn't go well. We host a bad movie night occasionally at our house, and
we have not watched it yet at Bad Movie Night.
We haven't watched it.
We were just watching that.
It did, however, get gonged by some of the same people who are in our Bad Movie Night group.
It's true.
So that's pretty impressive because we've watched some really bad movies.
We have.
So,
it's hard to say.
That was the City of Ember.
Yeah.
So stay tuned next week where we'll have a new book and some new clues throughout the week and see if you can't guess it.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for joining us. Please let us know if you have any thoughts or opinions, if you would ignore a kid running down the street.
If you like this book and think we had a bad take on it, that's fair. I'd really like to see the review of someone who was really invested in this book, because I think there's a lot of value in that critique. Mm-hmm. That maybe we were just both too out of it this week to really dig in as much as we could have.
As much as we would have liked.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's the case or not. It's hard to say because we are both fairly miserable right now.
We both do still have full-time jobs.
Yeah, we both have full-time jobs, and we've both had plague this week.
Yeah.
And by plague, I mean head colds, but still.
I'd love to hear you guys' opinions, especially on this one.
Especially dissenting opinions.
Yeah, sure. Jessica likes to argue.
I do.
But just in general, this is one that I like to hear feedback on.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you guys so much for listening. You can find us on social media. Our information is everywhere. We're on all of it. We are
on Instagram, Facebook, Tumblr, Twitter. Are we on anything else? We're ostensibly on SoundCloud.
Yeah, we're on SoundCloud, but don't follow us there. I mean, follow us, but you won't get new episodes there. It's too small.
Yeah, we don't get to upload a lot. We have too long of episodes.
Too long episodes.
But you can also find our stuff on Libsyn, Spotify, YouTube, and we should be under YA Sisterhood on all of those platforms. Is that right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Or
Y.A.Sisterhood. That, just keep looking.
Get creative. We're on there.
YA Sisterhood Podcast. Find us. We're
out there. We're on iTunes. We're on iTunes now too. I forgot.
Yeah, we are.
We're also on iTunes.
If you didn't know.
If you weren't listening to us on iTunes, then
you can.
Now you know.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.